Join me now in welcoming our second speaker, Caroline Berglund, who will be sharing insights on the power of psychological safety and inclusive workplace culture. Caroline is the founder and principal of Talk, a writer, speaker, facilitator, and storyteller with over 25 years of leadership development experience. Known for her dynamic and personalized coaching style, Caroline helps leaders grow through trust, psychological safety, and focus on the individual. A captivating speaker and lifelong learner, Caroline draws inspiration from great thinkers such as Da Vinci and Socrates while exploring what truly drives effective leadership and human connection. So please join me in welcoming Caroline to the floor.
Thanks, Carmen. That sounds fancy. Wow, I hope I can live up to that, Da Vinci and Socrates. I see some familiar faces in the crowd, and some I've had the opportunity to talk to at the break and some I haven't, so I look forward to reconnecting. What an honor to be asked today. Is my audio okay? Great. What an honor to have been asked here today. So let me begin with a story. 14 years ago, I started with one of the big consulting houses, and my responsibility was twofold. The first of which was the employee engagement survey. Has anybody taken an employee engagement survey before? You know, back in the day, they used to be like 100 questions. My job was actually to try to interpret the data. The second part of my role and responsibility in that big consulting firm was leadership development. So that was doing leadership workshops, executive coaching, team effectiveness stuff, the stuff I still do today. So while I was at the big consulting house, one of my very first clients was a law firm. I'd never worked with a law firm before. I'd worked in every other industry except for law. So manufacturing, tech, government, you name it. I've been in all of them, but I'd never been in a law firm. So what I did was we deployed the engagement survey, and through the engagement survey, we unearthed that leaders within that organization weren't feeling very supported. So as a result of that, we developed a leadership development program. So that program lasted a whole 2 years. We would come in for 2 days, and then we would separate for a couple months, come back for 2 days, separate for a couple months so that people could practice what we were teaching. It became pretty clear in that 2 years period of time with this first cohort, this culture is a bit different than any other culture I've seen. And so I've since gone on to work with lots of law firms, both in Canada and North America, and I realized that that firm wasn't unique, but it's thematic to law firms. So when I think about law firms, there's a couple things that come to mind. Pace, perfection, hierarchy, personality. Now those things exist in those other firms that I was saying, but it's almost like the switch is slightly turned up. And so when asked what's the future of law firms, it comes down to really this: going away from some of those perfectionist techniques, hierarchy techniques, and getting to a place of psychological safety where you're feeling safe to speak up. Here's the deal, guys. Unless we do that, we will not innovate, we will not create, we will not create inclusive environments, we will not enhance the employee experience unless we make personal connections at the office. Here's the conundrum though. We are actually living in what I call the on-demand world. So on-demand everything, fast, fast, fast. So right now I could pull out my smartphone, order groceries, get a date, get a divorce lawyer all before noon. So there's real implications to this on-demand world in terms of personal connection. So you've got these unpsychologically safe cultures, this on-demand thing equals not a lot of connection. So that's what we're really going to explore today, is how do we get personal connection in this environment. Imagine this. You walk into your office and your colleagues treat you like friends. Your boss sets the tone of psychological safety. There's a fellow by the name of Theodore Zeldin that I love, and he says, when will we make the same breakthroughs in the way we treat each other as we have made in technology? Let's break that down. Think about, go all the way back to the light bulb. right, to GPS, which I think was created for me because I'm very navigationally challenged, through to the internet. When will we make the same breakthroughs that we've done in tech and how we treat each other? I have a dream, to borrow a phrase, that we will understand that everybody has a story. Every human in this room has something going on in their world right now. Some of us have special needs kiddos. Some of us have parents in palliative care. Some of us are dealing with illness, whether it be ourselves or someone we love. My hope, my dream when doing the work that I do is that we all understand that. And to treat anybody other than kind is unconscionable. I have a dream. So this instant everything, TikTok, what's the pink one, by the way? Everybody know Instagram, right? Netflix, Uber, skip the dishes, smartphones. Research has suggested that we will have spent on our dying day, and this goes up every year, we will have spent 11 years on social media alone. 11 years. What does that do to personal connection and how we communicate? Here's some stats you might find interesting. A recent Gallup poll indicated that 23% of people around the globe, when asked the question, did you feel lonely at work yesterday? 23% said yes. That number increases if you're Generation Y or Gen Z. What age range is that? Does anybody know? What's the age group? Right, so 19 to 29 is the group that I'm talking about, and that number grows from 23% to 29%. Now let's dig into law firms, because I'm kind of known as the law firm whisperer amongst my own friends and the law firms that I work with. That number goes up exponentially into the 30th percentile, dependent on the role in which you have. So associate partners, 31%, partners, 30%. Now there's not a lot of data on legal assistance. So I assume that the number is around that 30th percentile. Anybody want to guess why that number might be so high? I'm going to just interact with you guys. Anybody want to guess? A lot of isolation. Go ahead.
People are working from home more and more,
Yeah,
and a lot of people are spending time on their phones, which
you got it.
feel connected, but it's really not connecting.
And there's no personal connection. You talk about the hybrid, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Oftentimes we'll just dive right into conversation without actually saying, how you doing? That how you doing, what's going on in your world is actually not a nice to have, it's a must have. It's a must have in order to create connection with those around you. Hey, this is me. This is me at 4 years old. I don't show you this because you're admiring my lovely fashion sense of a brown dress and blue jeans. Thanks, Mom. Actually, she probably just allowed me to do that. I show you this because I want you to tap back into who you were at 4 years old. Most of us are born healthy, trusting, communicative human beings. This girl is doing all of this stuff. I might do a little bit of that. But at some point along the way, we lose the ability to speak. What is it professional for me to say this? Should I speak up? Oh, a partner's in the room. Can I actually say something? For the next hour and a bit, I want you to tap back into who you were at 4 years old. Because this is how you make personal connection. So this girl at 4 years old, as my mom tells the story, would take Wonder Bread. You know the really healthy stuff back in the day? Do they still make that? Do they really? Okay, so we would have Wonder Bread, gives you an insight into my household, and I put it on the kitchen floor. And I would pull out the peanut butter jar and I'd put it on the pieces of bread, and then I'd go back and put on the jam. And I'd make a stack, like a stack of sandwiches. There was no texting, there was no emailing. I wanted to invite my friends over for lunch. So how did I do it? Guess. I whipped open the door and said, lunch is served. Tracy, Chris, bring a friend. The old way of communicating and creating personal connection required us to step out of our comfort zone, not hide behind a device, right? And so I want us to get back to that. That's my dream. And we do that in organizations as well. Here's the big conundrum for me, my existential angst, is that we all in this room have the power to change the world. And I know that sounds big, but if an idea sits within you, you will never change the world. So I really want to encourage us to stretch our comfort zone and feel safe that we can speak our truth. Let me give you some examples. Me Too movement started several years ago. Does anybody know how that started? So an individual posted about harassment, and it was actually an actress that just said, "Me too," 2 words. That was her contribution to the idea. Other examples are back in the 50s, a woman by the name of Rosa Parks said, "I'm not moving," right? There are examples in history that show us that speaking up actually can change the world. If you think about Greta Thunberg, does anybody know who that is? Young woman who started on the journey of climate change. An example of an organization that spoke up, had an idea, wanted to make an impact in the world, was Bell. I actually happened to work for Bell at one point, and they had a mental health initiative. Does anybody know what it was? Look at that, you already know what that is. So you have the power to change the world with your ideas, and I want you to start thinking about speaking up whenever possible, really. Have we done any favors in, someone mentioned the virtual world, the 2D world. We left the water cooler. We left the hall chats. I'm going to tell you a story. Back in 2020, when we were in the belly of the pandemic, I was doing a bunch of roundtables with CHROs and CEOs and saying, like, how are you navigating this thing? This is crazy. Still can't believe that we lived through that. But I ended up talking to one of the CEOs, and he was telling me about, he was pausing retiring because he wanted to make sure that everybody was able to navigate this thing. And I said, well, who's going to take your job when you retire? And he goes, well, I have 2 candidates. One, 80%, he's going to get it. So the pandemic unfolds, and I call him up. We have a coffee, and I said, okay, you're ready to retire. You retired. Who got the job? A person, the 80% person, or the B person? And he said, well, funny enough, I ended up giving the job to the B person. I said, what? They only had 20% opportunity to actually get the job. What happened? So person A was goals, 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 objectives, 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 would hit all of the KPIs, right? But person 2, what they demonstrated through the pandemic was a unique leadership competency. We've changed the competency landscape in terms of who is going to be a great leader in the post-pandemic world. She showed empathy, compassion. She would start team meetings with, how you doing? Are you okay? Like, I know you're dealing with the kids. And it wasn't about driving to the KPIs. It was saying, I see you as a human being. Leaders, who is a leader in the room? Everybody, I think, right? Mostly. These competencies don't go away. We can't go back to pre-pandemic world. We have to start showing compassion. We have to show personal connection. We have to show each other that I see you as a human being, having a human experience. We can't go back. At least that's what I think. This is Atticus. You may not know him, but this is my son. Atticus at the time, he was 15. He looks thrilled, doesn't he? This is the first day of virtual learning in 2020. What you may not see in this picture, maybe you do, he's a special needs kiddo. So for Atticus, that means he doesn't walk, he doesn't talk, he doesn't self-feed. So first day of virtual learning, we get him to sit in this chair, and he's in front of the screen. I'm like, how are they going to create any kind of connection with this kid that doesn't talk? And I've been fascinated, and I started watching, and I said to myself, I wrote down a line that said, communication is so much more than the words that we say. In fact, if you think of, let me just go forward a couple. 55% of what you communicate is dependent on body language. So there's probably a reason why we're doing this in person. And that I'm standing here is that I'm emoting through my body language. It's not just about the words that I'm saying. And then tone, anybody know what tone is? It's how you emote. I'm gonna date myself here. And if you get the reference, call it out. Bueller, Bueller. Where's that from? Right, so if you ever had a teacher or a university professor that was really monotone, you need to be, in your own way, like everybody has their own way of tone, inflection, and body language. Part of what I do is help other people be better public speakers, and I'm working with a CEO right now. I met with him last week, and he gave me his PowerPoint slide. And I said, it's pretty. Needs to be pretty, I guess, but I don't care. We're gonna focus on how you're gonna deliver that. And these PowerPoints, by the way, I think we're far too reliant on them, as an aside, because I think our focus should be on how we're delivering the message. So we've gone back to in-person, and this is our way to kind of reconnect those personal connections. And I know some of the law firms, most law firms have gone back hybrid, 3 days a week. Who's at 3 days a week right now? Who's 4? Who's 5? Yeah. So part of it is a good thing because we're getting back to personal connection, but it's hard to attract people into your organization if you're going back to 5 days. We've already got a sense of what that feels like to go, a few days a week. Here's a recipe. So my recipe for psychological safety. Psychological safety is the goal. Here are some of the ingredients. We already talked about comfort zone. Remember with the peanut butter? It's not going to feel always great to extend yourself to another human in the pursuit of personal connection. The second ingredient is that the leader sets the tone. If you get nothing other than today, I want you to come away from that being a leader in your firm. You set the tone of how psychologically safe your environment is. We're going to go through what all of this is too. And then the dreaded bum, bum, bum feedback. I don't want it. I don't want to give it, right? Let's talk about that in a sec. So here are some stats, though, just to anchor why being in a psychologically safe, trusting environment is so critical. 74% less stress, 74%. When we talk about loneliness and all of the things that we're talking about, that goes up exponentially in favor. 2 times more productive, 76% more engagement. What does engagement mean, by the way? Anybody? You're gonna make me work hard here. Connection, yeah. What else? I define it as 3 distinct behaviors. You might even want to write these down. You choose what you want to do. Say, what are your employees saying? So I see you at an afternoon barbecue and I say, hey, Carmen, I understand you work for X. Do you like it? Her retort actually to me is, yeah, I really dig it. Like, I love it. Here's the clincher. Nobody cares. Like, her boss isn't there. Her direct reports aren't there. She's just saying really cool things about the firm. What then happens is I go, where do I submit my resume? I want to work there. Stay behavior is when the recruiter calls, and they will call, right? You hang up the phone respectfully and say, today, I'm digging where I'm working. And the strive behavior is actually a really critical one. It's what I call the discretionary effort behavior. So it's that person that will put up their hands and say, you need help with that? I'm happy to do that. Hear me when I say, people in my law firms here, it's not about hours worked. It's about while I'm here, I feel implicated to actually do whatever is needed for the team and for the group. So say, stay, and strive. 13% fewer sick days, 40% less burnout, 10 times more energy at work. Just do the math on that one slide. This matters. And this is the future of law firms. It's the future of all organizations, but I would say there's in my perspective, a focus on getting to a more trusting, psychologically safe environment in law firms. All right, pull out your phones. We're gonna do a Menti. Has everybody done a Menti before? So there's a code at the very top, 28731278. I'd like you to help me define what's one word that comes to mind when you hear the term psychological safety. Let's see what you think. Freedom, stability, yes. This is a word cloud. So what's going to happen is as words are repeated, they'll get bigger and bigger if it's repeated. Communication, comfortable, freedom, empowerment, yes. Retention, calm, yes. Trust, yes. All of those things. So I'm going to let that continue while I go to the next slide. Belonging, yes. I feel safe to be my authentic self. One of the big things that I talk about in my practice is about when we all show up at work, we often put on a mask, Caroline included. What we hopefully want to do is start lowering that mask and showing each other who we authentically are. Lowering, if you think about an iceberg and the waterline, we want to start lowering the waterline of who we are, really showing people who we are. Doesn't mean that everybody has to tell you everything. It's about showing up and want to build trusting relationships around you. So those are all correct. Well done. So psychological safety is not a new term. In fact, it was coined back in the 50s by two organizational psychologists. Kahn said being able to show and employ oneself without fear or negative consequences of self-image, status, or career. Amy Edmondson, if you are at all interested in this topic, I would call her the queen of all things psychological safety. She does a really great TED Talk, and she's got a couple of books. And she said, it's a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. My favorite, though, is a fellow by the name of Timothy R. Clark. And he says an environment of rewarded vulnerability. You show up and you show your belly, I made a mistake, we are going to reward you for that. Then there's me. I say it's treating each other like friends fueled by kindness. Now, hear me when I say this. This is not about being friends. It's treating each other like friends. And it's not about niceness. It is not equal to niceness. So let's dig into this. There is a difference between trust and psychological safety. In that word cloud, the biggest word was trust. So I want to make sure that we understand the difference. Trust is a one-on-one relationship. I trust you, you trust me. In order for a team to be fully psychologically safe, every relationship needs to be a trusting one. So if you think about the partners in which you work, you might have a trusting relationship with a partner, but not with another, right? And if you're on a team, that's an unpsychologically safe team. So every relationship needs to be a trusting one. Now, when I say trusting one, it means I respect you to do what you say you're going to do. It's not about being happy. It's not what it is. I'm going to pause there. Any questions about the term psychological safety? Feel free to jump in whenever you feel like it. I want to walk you through a really cool study that started in 2014, lasted 2 years, and it was with Google. I've had the chance to go down to Google, and it's kind of a cool place. They do have a napping room, which is interesting. But who they're going to attract is going to be very different than someone like me. They have a napping room and snacks because they want to keep you there as long as possible. I got a kid to go home, so I'm not going to want to work there, right? But let me tell you about this study. Carmen said I had a thing for Socrates and Aristotle. This actual program or project was called Project Aristotle. Anybody want to guess why it was called that? Or am I the only nerd in the room that likes the Greek philosopher? The sum is does anybody know? The sum is greater than the individual parts. That's why they called it that. So they studied this thing for 2 years. What they wanted to know within Google, 37,000 people, why are some teams like killing it? And then some teams are really struggling. Like, why is this happening? So it's Google. They're collecting data. And they do it for 2 years. They look at 180 teams, 37,000 employees. They start asking the question, is it tenure, years of service? Is it because these folks are going to lunch with one another? Like, what's going on? And they couldn't find any pattern until they came up with the term psychological safety and said, those teams that are perfect are actually just showing up and being their authentic selves. Imagine if you could show up to work, strip it all away, and be yourself, be safe enough to say whatever you wanted to say, admit a mistake, and they'll all learn from that. Has anybody been on a team like that before? It's rare. It's rare. So leaders, take note. It's up to you to start setting those tones of, can people show up and make mistakes? Signs of unsafe teams. Anybody, what's a sign of an unsafe team? Blaming, yeah, what else? What's that? Gossip, oh yeah, yeah. You know what one of my favorite one is you have a meeting, nobody says anything, and then there's a meeting after the meeting, and then we all gossip about that, right? That is a pure sign of an unpsychologically safe environment. What might be another example? Mistakes get hidden, et cetera, et cetera. Let me show you through a couple of examples. We're going to work through in-table groups on this as well. So, anybody know the Columbia Space Shuttle? Yeah. 2003. Upon entry into the atmosphere, it blows up, killing all 7 members. Here's what you may or may not know. The engineers that worked on that rocket were fervent with their feedback to their managers and their managers with a software implication called MCAS. They knew that there was something wrong, but they were ignored and told to basically shut up. Can you imagine being the engineer on that when you watch that blow up? You might think, oh God, that's a once in a lifetime thing. That's only happened once, right? Let me take you back to 1986. Now, I might be the oldest one in the room here, I don't know. But back in the day, in 1986, I was in the classroom and they wheeled in, Joanne knows, they wheeled in a TV and we were going to watch it. You know why we were going to watch it? There was a teacher on that rocket. What happened there? Do you remember that? Yeah, they entered into the atmosphere, blew up again. Same thing, different problem. They had an O-ring that there was going to be a malfunction when it hit a certain temperature. Same thing, engineers were like all going crazy saying there's going to be a problem. And one of the engineers was called Chicken Little, like, oh, stop running around like the whole world is going to implode on itself. It's not, it's going to be fine. And you think, okay, those are 2 big examples, NASA. Reagan did a big investigation. Ronald Reagan, for those youngins, he was the president of the United States back in the day. But you think, oh God, those are 2 big incidents. Was that it? No. Apollo 1, 55, a little bit before my time, some of us have seen the movie. There was a fire in the cabin. So consistently, they made mistakes because of culture. Leaders didn't want to listen to the truth. And there was real ramifications as a result of it. People died. People died. Now, we think we're okay, but it takes a long time to change culture. It took years and years and years to change this culture where people felt safe enough to speak. Let me give you another example. Oh boy. Boeing. Anybody know what's going on with Boeing? I don't get on a MAX 787, and I'm a super elite flyer, by the way. I got to work hard to not get on. 737, thank you. 787? Right, we're good. Thank you. So in 2018, what happened? Anybody know?
2 planes crashed.
2 planes crashed. 300, and let me get the right number, 346 people died. Why? Same problem, engineers saying there's a challenge. There is a fabulous documentary on Netflix. If you're interested in the topic of psychologically safety, I would strongly recommend you watch it. It's called Downfall. So in Downfall, they follow Boeing and they say, so what happens? And I will tell you, I know a little bit about Boeing. I had some family members that worked for Boeing. It was a strong safety culture, very strong safety culture. And then what happened is that you had a leadership change. Leadership change is always fascinating when you watch that at the top, because there's implications for that. So with this leadership change, instead of having this culture of safety, we're not just lip safety. We actually believe in safety. They're like, how do we get some more profit, right? How do we get a little bit more profit? And they're trying not to be overt about it, but they are starting to cut corners a little bit. They get a little bit more profit, cut corners a little bit more, and this goes on. And that causes culture shift. It's okay to get away with cutting corners. Something happened in 2024 with Boeing. Anybody know? The door blows off. This is just 6 years after that first incident. So do I trust getting on one of these aircrafts right now? Because I know, looking at the NASA example and other examples around how long it takes to really move culture around psychological safety, it takes a minute, and they're still in the belly of it. And that CEO is quite interesting to watch. So what about law firms? In this environment of hierarchy and precision and perfection, it's sometimes really difficult to speak up and to create that culture of personal connection, psychological safety. But in order to thrive, I think you just learned about AI, yes? And in the hybrid world and in the client pressure world, firms already have really smart people. You know this in the people that you work with. They're the creme de la creme. They're the smartest of the smart. We don't need any more of that. What we need is to create an environment where it's safe to share ideas, to speak up, to do all of those things. Remember, you all have great ideas. So what are some of the signs of a safe team on the other side? Anybody?
Share their ideas.
Share their ideas openly, yeah. What else? Accountability. What else? Respect. Good. Support. Good.
Share mistakes.
Yep. It's a strange thing because I don't hit very many firms or organizations broadly that are psychologically safe. I can feel it as soon as I walk in. You can feel it, you can see it, you can hear it. But there is one organization I've had the pleasure of observing, and it's called NextJump. This is a tech company in the States. Charlie Kim is the CEO, and he says, at NextJump, you can't get fired for performance issues. You get coached, you get supported. What do you think happens as a result of it? You can't get fired. Okay, now, I will tell you the recruitment process is quite detailed, but you never have to worry that I'm going to get fired because I've made a mistake. Now, again, if there are some massive legal implications, and I have to say that in a room full of people in the law firm area, of course they're going to get fired. But if it's a performance issue, you can't get fired. So you can imagine how that affords the luxury of people wanting to hear feedback. Like, I want to know what I'm doing well and what I'm not doing well. There's not a lot of great examples of psychologically safe environments, but there are some in law. McCarthy Tetro is an organization, one of the 5, that does leadership development programs. They consistently are on, the great companies to work. Anybody from McCarthy here? No? Norton Rose? Mental health is part of their DEI strategy. Anybody from Castles? No? They embed inclusion into their strategy. BLG? Hey, built inclusion as part of their infrastructure. And this is just me reading about some of you. Is any firm perfect? No. But some of the strategic initiatives some of the Canadian law firms are employing are really showing, that they want to create a psychologically safe environment. All right. What are some things your firm is doing to enhance psychological safety? Anna Menti, let's go. 2673-1278. Want to know what's going on in your firm. What are you guys doing? Leadership training, yay! Training, education, team building, touch base meetings, yes. These are not nice to haves. These are table stakes now. Back in the day, what I do would be the first to go in any organization when there was a pinch for profit or numbers or whatever. And I don't think that you can get rid of this personal connection stuff. It's that important. Excellent, very good. Thank you for your feedback. Mentorship, yes. All right, let's just go through some of the ingredients that make up psychological safety in my point of view. The first is comfort zone, which we've already talked about a little bit. You can ask people to be vulnerable without having comfort zone. So you want to support that as a leader, you want to encourage it. When people go out of their comfort zone, you applaud them. The second is leader sets the tone. And what I mean by that is I want you to be vulnerable. When you make a mistake, you admit it. Show them, walk the talk. Be curious, be open to feedback. Listen, admit mistakes, all of that stuff. So comfort zone, I want you to walk the talk. And the third is I want you to mix in some feedback. So there are a couple of acronyms that I use that I want to gift to you to use. One is for providing recognition, and the acronym that we use is FACTS. What are the facts? What's the implication? And thank you. So excuse my term, but the shit sandwich doesn't work. So I'm going to say something nice, then I'm going to give you the actual feedback, and then I'm going to say something nice. That's the constructive feedback. Sorry, I went to constructive feedback. But with recognition, I want you to recognize, there's a stat I saw that 73% of all employees in Canada don't feel as though they're recognized enough. So if something good happens, I need you to say it when? At the next one-on-one? When it happens. Real-time feedback means something. If you wait until the end of the week or the month or the whatever, at the end of the year, you're doing a disservice. So sorry, I went to constructive feedback with that shit sandwich. So the formula is for constructive feedback is facts, impact, and then solutioning. It's interesting, with one of the law firms that I've been working with for 14 years now, I had the opportunity to help deploy their performance management system. And while I was preparing, I was going to go on a road tour for this. I was going to Vancouver, I was going to Toronto, I was going to Montreal. And I was having a really hard time thinking, how am I going to facilitate this, that people understand the value of providing feedback? So everybody goes, providing feedback, right? Like, look at a formula, all that stuff. But how do I get to the heart of all of this? And it was no coincidence that that day I was driving Atticus to school. And then I was going to be hopping on a plane. Don't worry, someone was going to be picking him up after school. But as I got to the school, I had some time before I had to be at the airport. So I asked the teacher, could I kindly sit in the classroom? She said, of course. So let me set the tone. There's a motley crew of kids with different challenges, right? You got some that can talk, some that can't, some that are in feeding tubes. It's a real motley crew. So I somehow squeezed my bum in one of those little chairs because he was pretty young at the time. And I started watching this teacher masterfully teaching feedback and the importance of it. So there was a flip chart on one side and then a screen like this up. On the screen was a butterfly, but not just any butterfly, it was a tiger butterfly. So it's exactly what you think. It had striations as a tiger. And the teacher asked for volunteers. Anybody want to come up to the front of the room? Scotty, who happens to have Down syndrome, still a very good friend of our family, pops up and says, I want to do it, I want to do it. And so the teacher says, okay, Scotty, come on up. And the teacher said, okay, Scotty, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take that flip chart and recreate that tiger butterfly. So he goes up and he draws the wings, and the teacher goes, very good. And goes to the rest of the class, and for those that could talk, said, does it look the same? And even with these kiddos that have some social challenges, long pregnant pause. I don't want to hurt Scotty's feelings, right? Like you can see it in their heads. Finally, Sarah stands up and she says, not to be mean, I'm not trying to be mean, Scotty, but you forgot the antenna. So he goes, yeah, you're right, I did forget the antenna. So he goes back and he draws the antennas, comes back to the room, and the teacher says, okay, does the tiger butterfly look the same on the flip chart as it does? Another long pregnant pause. Another little girl, Anna, says, would someone give Scotty some colored markers so he could color in the tiger print? He goes, Scotty's like, yeah, of course, I need to color it in. So he does that. This goes back and forth probably 15 minutes. And the final thing that the teacher says, which was so profound, was, did we make a better butterfly by providing him feedback all along the way? And everybody said, yeah, that's all we're doing with providing feedback. We're making a better butterfly, folks. Now, the intent has to be correct behind providing feedback. If you've ever gotten constructive feedback where someone's out to get you, feels very different than what I observed in that room. So I'd like you to start thinking about feedback in that butterfly story, and maybe not in the ways that you've seen constructive feedback before. So I said, psychological safety is not about being nice. You all know that person in the office that puts on that big, bright, happy face. If I was any better, la, la, la. You know that person. That's not psychological safety. That's not being safe to speak up at all, in fact. So the recipe is what we've just gone through. Comfort zone, I want you to speak up. I want you to kick it old school. Those are the ingredients that I'd like you to take away. Now, with your permission, I'd like us to workshop a little bit of this for the next, 20 minutes or so. In your table groups, I'd like you to do the following. Think about a moment when you didn't feel safe to speak up. What made it unsafe? So think about a time. It doesn't have to be in your current firm. It could be just in general. And then now that you thought about a time, what made it possible? And as a group, I want you to create a list of what were the things that made you trust one another, and what were some of the things that killed the culture or detracted from trust and psychological safety. And then discuss what would it safe enough to speak look like in your respective firms. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. Let's bring this home. I mean, really, this section is about, you got to hear me talk and pontificate there about what personal connection is, why it's important, why psychological safety is important. But I want to hear from you. And I've had the opportunity to go through some of the tables, but who'd be willing to just tell me what you were talking about in your tables? And then our friend here, sorry, what was your name? Anila is going to come with a mic. This is a safe environment to speak up. And they're going to give you a mic, and that might feel a little weird, but we want to hear what you have to say. Who'd be willing to share what you were putting out in your tables? Stretch the comfort zone.
No.
Did you want to talk?
I can
Okay.
talk to about my table.
Yes. Yes.
So some of the things we talked about in terms of trust that we thought was, are we answering all the questions, sorry, or just?
Whatever, however you want to do it.
We thought for trust and talking about our experiences is being able to be vulnerable. So having those vulnerable moments, being able to share their own story. So it's like real. Being able to listen, because that's important. Coaching, being the ability to bounce off ideas. No? And then we thought about the culture killers and, sometimes micromanagement.
Yeah, always micromanagement. Not sometimes. If you are being micromanaged, hear me when I say, or you are micromanaging, it's generally a sign of a lack of trust. Now, I will give you a caveat. If you're being micromanaged and you're new, that's not micromanaging, right? That's just helping. But if you're a seasoned, tenured employee and you're being micromanaged, there's a problem around trust. Yeah, good. What else?
Fear and intimidation.
Ooh, tell me more.
I don't think we can later. We'll have another
Okay.
conversation.
Is there a cocktail hour at some point? Okay, well, this is when, it's funny. I was with a group last week and I said, define psychological safety. And one woman came up to me and said, well, it's speaking the truth without needing the wine. And I said, yeah, that's true. Okay, please.
Non-inclusivity,
Yeah.
like not understanding everybody's differences and what they bring to the table. There was some mention here at the table about being put on the spot and not feeling prepared for those moments.
Yeah. By the way, leaders, don't do that, right? Have you ever been in a room or a meeting and they say, and Carmen, what do you think? Some people will flourish in that kind of environment and other people will retract. Sometimes people have a physiological reaction, flushing, blushing, sweating, and then everybody knows that they're embarrassed. And by the way, never highlight that if that's happening. Never point that out. So don't point. And the leader sets the tone around that. If you're seeing other people do that, in a room, you stop that behavior. Yeah, good.
And then just non-equitable.
Yeah,
And then toxic individuals. I think we kind of talked about that.
those are fun. So I really believe this, in order to have a competitive advantage in law firms right now, in order to have a competitive advantage, we have to get away from ego, hierarchy, perfectionism, all of the things that we talked around culture, and we have to get back to personal connection. How we get back to personal connection is through developing trusting, psychologically safe environments. And it all begins with us. Who else wants to talk about whatever was going on in your group? We want to hear from you. Yay! And then I might point out some group over here that has a really unique, I don't know if they were going to be willing to share, but yes.
Hi. So I'm just going to talk about the trust makers and the culture killers,
Sure.
and I don't plan on giving any examples, so don't ask that question. People are comfortable to talk about their home life, the challenges and wins that they experience, be their authentic self, give people some grace, empathy and understanding, being honest and giving feedback, seeing that there's action that follows the feedback that's given, multiple channels available to voice concerns, leadership is open to feedback, authentic leadership engagement, mistakes are allowed, and there's support for each other. So that's the trust makers. Culture killers.
Can I just pause you there? Like that people have, it's like, have you ever been on a team when you know kind of everybody has your back? You know, that's the kind of environment we're talking about. It's almost unspoken. Like everybody's got your back. Go ahead.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
what my point was. Culture killers, people taking advantage of kindness, confidentiality.
Ooh, did you talk about that? People taking,
Yeah, we did.
tell me more.
Just in general, I mean, when leadership is kind and cares,
Yep.
some people will say, well, I can get away with, taking advantage of the kindness and thinking, well, let me ask for more since you gave me this, just kind of, and it kind of goes from there.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Did I kind of speak it? Okay. Absolutely. Let me pass you the mic.
Just that when you have that kindness towards one person, the person who sits next to them may be at that point feeling like they're in a toxic environment because the expectation has changed.
Right. Very good. Good discussion. Yeah.
Good add-on. Thanks, team member. Confidentiality being broken and used against them. Some of them are repeats. That's why I'm going second, so I don't repeat everything.
That's okay.
Fear, worried about getting fired, toxic employees, gossip, watching some employees not contributing when you're working really hard, poor performance management, and not enough support.
Thank you. And I just want to go to the point about gossip. If there is gossip on the team, you've got a problem. I have a team. And what you didn't see is right before this, someone came to me on my team on my phone and started gossiping with another team member. My retort was, go talk to them. I'm not mom. Now, if you still can't resolve the issue after you've given it a good shot, then come to me and I'll help you mediate, but I'm not mom. Gossip is not allowed on my team. And I say that out loud because it's the leader, once again, that sets the tone. You show your team what's allowed and what's not. Our value at Talk Talk is we treat each other with kindness. And I really mean that. I only hire for kindness. If you demonstrate non-kindness, you are gone. We treat each other well. We treat each other kindly. So again, it's your job as leaders to show up and do that. One more team, if you wouldn't mind. Tell me what you were talking about. Anybody? Push your comfort zone. If this is not something you typically do, I want you to know that this is a safe place. I will reward your vulnerability, I promise. Someone over here.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Give him a hand, because he's doing something you don't want to do.
We were just talking about what's interesting when it comes to culture killers, and in law firms particular, is the ego.
Yeah.
And often when you're dealing with partners And when you're a staff member or you're facilities or director, you often find that the partners don't really have too much to hear from you. But if you have, like, I did a job where we were working with an architect, and the architect had an opinion about some construction we were doing at a firm once. And once the architect started speaking up about the project, the partners would listen to that individual. And so they'll take criticism or they'll take direction from someone who's a professional in that level of what they do. But when it comes to, facilities, and you're looking at a project and go, oh, we should do this, they've always got an opinion of, no, this is what we're going to do. And so I find within culture killers, often if you don't have the right kind of partner or people around the table who are willing to listen to people, you find yourself going very quiet inside. And anyone who knows me, that's not me. But you learn your place. And culture killers in law firms is learn your place. There's a hierarchy. You don't speak out of term, and you've got to be very careful what you say.
We were also speaking in your group, if you don't mind me contributing to this, that you experienced the opposite, where a partner was very inclusive and welcoming. This is my thesis for today. It's around future of work, right? In order for law firms to be competitive, we're going to have to get out of that space, the ego, the hierarchy, well, you've got the title, so therefore you've got the voice. We've got enough smart people. We now need to create safe spaces. A couple other things, thank you for that. A couple other things that I heard. One of the things I heard was, well, not everybody feels safe to speak up in front of other people. This isn't about introversion, extroversion. It's kind of a matter of speech where what I'm saying is that you're safe enough to share your idea. Now, it might be through email, it might be one-on-one. It doesn't necessarily doing like what I'm doing here, like speaking up in front of a group of 100 people or whatever it is. So let me be clear about that. And I also heard another group talk about, and I'm super fascinated by this, is that they have a structure that doesn't have partners, but they have employees. I think that's really, and I've taken the card of that individual because I want to really study that. That might be an interesting way to do that. Before I go to the last couple of slides, do you have any questions of me or of each other before we move on? Or comments?
I'll just build a little bit on Berg here, and it's the culture killer that you were just talking about, and that is something that has kind of been frustrating to me for a number of years is law firms are more than lawyers.
Yes.
And people, they don't get that. Law firms are more than lawyers. Your staff, your law firm cannot operate without your staff, because otherwise you're going to have a bunch of lawyers not knowing how to fill the paper in the photocopier or how to put a dish in a dishwasher.
Usually the support services is bigger than the number of lawyers there are, right?
So your culture killer needs to be the inclusivity needs to really be inclusive.
It really does.
And remove, I work for you or you work for me. No. We work together.
So how do you do that? Do you have any idea?
I yell a lot.
She says I yell a lot. But how do you break down some of those barriers between, I'll call it support services side and the lawyer side?
We're hoping you could tell us.
There's a bridge, and I think that there's educating both sides. I think oftentimes the support services side gets a lot of training, and then the lawyers don't. And that's a real miss. And in order to really bridge that gap, both sides need to be taught this stuff, and hopefully together. Let's not segregate the two. What are we doing? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a great idea. I don't see most lawyers really participating in it or absorbing it. If they do, they think, oh, that's not me. That's for everyone else.
But it's not. And I think we have to show the competitive advantage. The firms that are really understanding this and the lawyers that are really understanding it are the ones that are benefiting. Not only from a profit perspective, but the fact that people are feeling, I'm really digging showing up, coming to work. Because my voice is heard. I can be my authentic self. I can take that mask off, right? Yeah. We have to start etching towards that.
That's one thing we were talking about, and it also builds on what Vern was saying. It's not always about feeling unsafe to speak.
Yep.
It's about, like, for example, I could say anything I want there.
Yeah.
I've been there a long time. I'm not concerned I'm going to get fired.
Yep.
I'm not concerned I'm going to be embarrassed or humiliated or talked down to. But I know in most cases I will be ignored.
Yeah.
I don't feel unsafe. I just don't feel heard. So many times I won't say anything because
What's the point, right? So that again, I think comes down to, I mean, it's a long conversation, but I think it comes down to educating the importance of it. And by the way, it's just the humanity of it all. Like, why are we listening to some people and not listening to another? Are we not? That's where I started. Are we not all human beings having a human existence? There's no hierarchy around humanity. Did I get a, oh yeah? Like that? I get very passionate about this. But yeah, I think we can educate around
I
that.
think the issue is like you're saying, there is no hierarchy.
There it
should
is.
be
Yes.
no hierarchy.
Appreciate
But
the
for
current,
many people,
appreciate that. I understand the current reality. The conference today is called The Future of Work. That's where the future needs to go. I really believe that. Yeah, Carmen.
Sorry, my thought on that, because I think it is quite separate, the people services versus the lawyers themselves. My thought on that was mentorship. So maybe having those conversations with those partners that are very engaging, and maybe saying, listen, could you maybe chat with like partner C
Yeah.
and have a chat with that person because they seem to be a bit more abrasive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe approaching it that way. I struggle with the same thing, but I know that there are some partners that excel in that area. Maybe having candid conversations with them.
I love that idea. I want to honor the time that I've been afforded. And one last mentee, because I have a lot of existential angst, which is like, does what I do have any meaning at all? Tell me, what will you do differently as a result of today? Let this hour and a half have some semblance of meaning to you, where you actually do something different. So tell me what you're going to do differently. On the Mentee, 2673-1278. What are you going to do differently as a result of our time today? As you're doing that, I want to extend my appreciation to each of you and allowing my voice to be heard today. And I ask that you join me in the movement of accelerating how we treat each other, just as we have invested in tech. Thanks, guys. Oh, I got one last thing. I brought a gift. This, forever whoever wants it, is a complimentary in-person workshop with myself, full day, my last book and a Yeti mug. But what you have to do for it is stand up and tell me what you're going to do differently. You got to stretch the comfort zone. First person that does it. Awesome. There we go. Give her a hand.
Thank you so much for today. I love your message of kindness. It's so important. That's one of the things I'm going to do is think about kindness and people that are different from me and their perspective of where they're coming from. I'm also going to start asking for feedback from my team on what to them makes a psychologically safe environment, and then incorporating some of those things in our meetings and the way I communicate.
What was your name?
Callie.
Callie, thank you. You've made my existential angst go down a little bit more. Thank you. I appreciate everybody. I'm going to be around a little bit if you have any questions, but I'll send it over back to Carmen. Thank you, guys.